Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Recently I was talking with a friend and we got to talking about our checking accounts, and she said, is it bad that I keep $0 in my checking account? Before we get too far into the video, you know I'm going to ask, how much do you aim to keep in your checking account? Make sure to hit pause on the video and answer because I'm really curious as to what your take on this situation is. While those well-credentialed CFPs, those certified financial planners, aka the financial experts, do have a general guideline on how much you should be keeping in your checking account. Since your checking account is the operating account that bills are paid out of, our recommendation is 1 to 2 months worth of expenses. Search after search found the same exact guideline over and over again. Some even recommended 1 to 2 months worth of expenses plus a 30% buffer. Why a buffer? Well, to protect your downside. Banking is a wildly profitable industry, and each and every year, banks make about $15 billion in overdraft fees. So clearly, when accounts run too low, banks are profiting big time. But here's the scary part. If you read the fine print, the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says that 80% of the $15 billion comes from just 9% of customers who keep getting hit over and over again with upwards of 10 overdrafts a year. That's pretty scary. Many of those CFPs go on to say once you have that 1 to 2 months worth of expenses in your checking account, you want to set aside 2 to 4 months worth of expenses in a savings account, ideally a high yield savings account. So it's safe, it's liquid, it's ready should you need it, but in the meantime, you're maximizing your potential returns. And if you look at those numbers, the 1 to 2 months of expenses in your checking and then 2 to 4 months in your savings, that's pretty on par with the traditionally recommended 3 to 6 months for an emergency fund. So these CFPs are saying that your emergency fund should be spread out among your checking and your savings. When it comes to your checking account, odds are it's making next to nothing in interest. So when you have this mentality of, I want to put my money to work making me money, it can be a bit of a dilemma figuring out how much do I need to have in my checking account to cover those upcoming expenses and how much can I siphon off and put to work making me money. I'm going to be honest, I differ from the experts here. I don't really keep a 1 to 2 months worth of expenses stashed away in my checking account. Rather, I keep about $1,000 on top of whatever I expect my upcoming bills to be. I feel like that's enough of a cushion that I can cover anything unexpected should it pop up. Note, I do have an emergency fund. For this, I tend to use a money market account or a high yield savings, and right now I'm actually using some T-bills as well. As far as my emergency fund goes, I keep about 8 months worth stashed away, and I know that may seem like it's a little bit on the high side, but honestly, I'm a bit cautious and I just don't want to run out of money. And as a small business owner and a 1099 employee through my side hustles, I have to make sure that I have money on hand to pay taxes when they come up every single quarter. I have a reason for keeping a low balance in my checking account, and that is that we follow a zero-based budget in our household. Basically, a zero-based budget is every dollar that comes into your household for the month is assigned a job. Maybe that is being allocated towards a bill or towards discretionary spending or even towards savings or investing. Basically, there is no dollar left behind. So basically, after every dollar is given its job, you're left with $0. Hence the name zero-based budget. So if my goal is to have a $1,000 cushion in my checking account, but that balance is actually growing from month to month, that means I'm not doing my job with the zero-based budget correctly. That means I have dollars that are not being assigned a task to do. They're just hanging out in my checking account. And I love a zero-based budget. And I know proponents of keeping a higher balance in your checking account might think, well, what if something unexpected comes up and you only have $1,000 or even less, like my friend who tries to keep next to nothing in her checking account? Well, I don't really think that's a concern, so long as you have that emergency savings to tap into. In our household and in our situation, all of our regular bills are set up on auto pay. My husband and I actually split the bills, so some come out of his account and some come out of my account. We both follow a zero-based budget, so it's not a big deal. But being that these bills happen every single month, we have a darn good idea of what they are and what they're expected to be for the next month. Any other bill that happens to come by in this household or any other spending that occurs goes on a credit card. So even if there is an unexpected expense like a repair or whatever it may be, it goes on the credit card first. You bet I'm going to capture those reward points. But being that it goes on the credit card first, that gives me whatever time I need to transfer money from my savings to my checking. Now I know most transfers do happen same day. However, sometimes there are situations like a Sunday or a holiday where transfers can take an extra business day, but I have that time because it went on the credit card first. So by keeping a lower amount in my checking account, I feel like it allows me to put more of my money to work. Granted, I do use a checking account that pays interest, but I mean, the interest is almost laughable. It's probably a couple of cents each and every month. I mean, I'm not going to turn it down, but I certainly don't feel like I'm maximizing my money's potential when it's in the checking account. I just feel like the checking account is there for the necessity of covering expenses. Could you keep less than $1,000 in your checking account? Sure. Could you keep more than $1,000 and closer to that 1 to 2 months worth of expenses? Of course you could. So much of this comes down to personal preference. For some, maybe having a couple months worth of expenses in their checking account helps them to sleep at night. And I really do think passing the pillow test is an important one. What you are doing with your money should help you sleep soundly at night. If money is causing you to stress out and toss and turn, well, it's time to make some different choices, ones that help you feel better. For some, I'm sure $1,000 feels like a bit too much of a cushion, like my friend who aims to get that balance towards zero. Now, that is a bit extreme. I like the idea of having some kind of buffer built in. The only thing worth mentioning here is that you want to make sure you keep enough of a balance to make sure you cover if your account has a minimum balance requirement. Not all do, but many do. I like checking accounts that don't have a lot of strings, like not requiring a minimum balance. I want as few requirements as possible. Here are the criteria that I use when checking for a good checking account. FDIC insurance protects individuals in the unlikely event of a bank failure, meaning you would still get your money back if the bank went kaput. I feel like there's no reason to use a bank that is not FDIC insured. To me, it makes a bank legitimate, and I feel like there's no point in banking with an institution that is not FDIC insured when there are so many that are and have that extra layer of security. FDIC insurance covers up to $250,000. If you have more than that, an easy workaround is to simply title your accounts differently. For instance, let's say you have $300,000 that you want to store safely. If you put all $300,000 in one account, only $250,000 of it would be subject to FDIC insurance. However, if you put $250,000 in an account with, say, your first name and last name, then $50,000 in an account with your first name, middle initial, and last name, all $300,000 would be FDIC insured. FDIC insurance is primarily available on checking accounts, savings accounts, CDs, account types like that. No monthly fees. I feel like this one's pretty self-explanatory. If a checking account or a savings account has a fee, it's not for me. I don't want a monthly maintenance fee. I don't want a balance requirement. I feel like banking has gotten so incredibly competitive over the years that it's so easy to get a checking account that has no fees. Why would you go with one that has fees? As an added layer of protection, I actually link my savings account to my checking account. That way, if there was ever a situation where my checking account was running low and an expense came up, my bank could simply dip into my savings account and allow that check to clear. And that way, I wouldn't face any penalty. Now, I've never overdrafted my account, but I feel like why not set this up? It's free to set up, it's easy to use, and it gives you an extra layer of protection. Nationwide availability. I think this one comes down to personal preference. I think the smaller, more local credit unions can be wonderful. They often have far better interest rates on their savings accounts, and sometimes they have extra added little perks. Like I had one that actually gave you a life insurance policy simply for having an account with them. But with that said, I do like to go with nationally recognized brands. My husband's in the service, so we tend to move a lot. And I found that the smaller ones have a harder time acclimating to our relocations, and it causes a few more hiccups in our financial life. As far as the online or physical location debate, I don't really have a strong feeling either way. I think online banks are wonderful, and these are definitely going to be the ones that have the highest interest rates on high yield savings accounts. So if you're already using them for your high yield savings account, you certainly could use them for your checking as well. And many of these online banks have superb customer service. I actually have an online bank and a bank with physical locations. My checking account is associated with a bank with physical locations, and my savings is with an online bank to get that higher yield savings. There are certain things I actually like to do in person at the bank, and mainly it's because the people who work at my bank branch are awesome. I get to bring my dog. They always have treats. So I just actually really enjoy going, but honestly, it just comes down to personal preference. The final category would be ATM fees. Make sure you use one that has access to a wide network of ATMs and that it will reimburse you fees if you go to an out-of-network ATM. Little moment of honesty here, I've never actually used an ATM. If that money goes into my checking account, odds are it's not coming out and more than likely it's heading to investments. But if I'm in a situation where I truly need cash, I'll just go to the bank branch. Peanut would love the trip anyway. He gets a bone, I get a sucker. It's a great day for everyone. Well, that's gonna do it for me today, guys. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.